fighter. Great to have you here. Look, this happened on base. We care about our fighting men and women very much. But I believe that the issues that are going to wind up being relevant to why this happened are going to be non-military in nature. This is about this man's particular mental health disposition, how it was being treated and not. Does it seem fair to say that at this point?
You'd hope that that would be the circumstance. Clearly there's probably a causal link between who he was, what he did, and the circumstances that he was in. We will determine all of that, but I think you're absolutely spot on. This is not inherently a military story.
Now, the concern with mass shootings in general is that we wind up developing mental health was there and ignored. We don't see ignored in this. We see documentation of it. There's a process to discover here, and that's part of what I want to do with you. Also a little confusing. Not diagnosed with PTSD, but under a process for diagnosis. Explain how the military works with screening and testing.
Well, again, it's not unique to the military in terms of how you do that. The medical care in the military is not dissimilar from what you or anybody else would receive. He was in the process of trying to be diagnosed. He acknowledged, as Barbara had indicated, that he had a traumatic brain injury. He said that himself. That needs to be identified. He had come back from Iraq. Let me take a step back. Before you deploy to combat, you go through a medical evaluation. It's very robust, very rich. Doctors are involved in that.
Medical's part of mental?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's all uploaded. It's all part of the record. You deploy, you conduct your operations, and then when you come back, you go through a very similar post-deployment evaluation. You want to see where the gaps are. He was in the process. When he had come back after his deployment in 2011, he came back. Obviously, the system was working. It picked up that this soldier had a problem. What I don't understand is if he had a problem and he was under diagnosis, why did he, in the midst of that, move to a new location? You can always have a gap in the type of care. You want to have a continuity of care. Be that as it may, he moved to Fort Hood, and he just got to Fort Hood 2 months ago. And he was immediately placed back into the evaluation status.
And it's interesting, we keep talking about PTSD because it's something people recognize, but important to note, this man was supposedly suffering from depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric complaints that were being treated. So it was definitely an ongoing thing. And that leads us to the next question. Again, this is a developing story. The firearm that he used, we believe, was his own, not U.S. military issued, that he had a permit for his own hand. The question becomes, if you're being treated for depression and you're under the process of evaluation for PTSD, why do you get to keep your concealed permit? Is that because the military doesn't control a private right to the firearm?
That's right. As I understand, he had a concealed permit, or a concealed carry permit. That dies when it comes to the post. The post has its own rules. You cannot have that concealed carry permit while you're on post. The fact that he got it on post, sadly, is probably, we can probably get to the bottom of it. We'll figure out why, but it's not hard to bring a weapon on post. If he had challenges, it wouldn't be hard for him to bring a weapon on post. Unless there's an indicator for somebody to stop you as you're coming on post and go through your stuff. It wouldn't have happened.
And this is a big part of the debate when it comes to mental health. It's so confused. It's ignored on some ways, and on other ways it's given the wrong kind of attention. Here, you have someone who's mentally ill. Should that have been a flag? They're being treated for depression. Is that something that should flag you in terms of whether or not they have a weapon? Not for the military, but in general.
Everyone else?
Because we see it in all these mass shootings. How does someone who's being treated for mental illness wind up getting a gun the way someone without it? Well, mental illness doesn't mean violent. Well, what kind of mental illness? How much do we look into it? This story is going to reveal a lot of those same questions. Another dimension, 2009. Horrible to have to remind people. You lived on base, you know it very well. I covered that story for a very long time, what happened in 2009. There were a lot of changes afterwards.
Right.
The base was supposed to be tightened. It is basically a city. Tens of thousands of people.
It is. 90,000 folks live on that post.
So is there, from what you know so far, fair to say, oh, there are lapses in security there, have to be tighter, our fighting men and women aren't safe on base? Fair criticism?
Of course it's a fair criticism. But what you're seeing is you can never have a 100% solution. This is an individual that was able, and he probably didn't take a lot of effort, but he was able to work his way through that system and to do what he just did. It's horrible.
Getting the handgun through, yes, it's supposed to be very tight. Yes, now Fort Hood, as much as any military installation, is a no-gun zone, right, for people on base. But that doesn't mean that you're going to check every single person whether they have a weapon as they're coming in, or that's all you'd be doing at the gate. Right?
Chris, you could. That's exactly right. You would completely shut down effective operations on that post if you did it with everybody coming on base.
So you don't have any real questions about the integrity of security protocols at the base?
No, no. Well, obviously things are going to have to be reviewed. But no, we can't immediately throw the baby out with the bathwater, that everything's totally screwed up, that this is a major, major issue. Clearly, this is egregious, this is horrible. But we need to be able to evaluate very precisely how did this individual get his hands on his weapons. If he's in the midst of this evaluation, how did he go downtown and buy a weapon? How did that happen?
That's right.
How did that happen?
That's a huge part of the story about where mental health intersects with how we allow people to have certain rights in society. It gets complicated because you don't want to color all mentally ill people with the same brush. But Spyro,
Right.
thank you very much for the